Bears cornerback Jaylon Johnson is the latest example of why placement in the NFL Top 100 is not indicative of talent or production. Despite an awesome 2023 season, Johnson was left off the list. So today I want to talk about how great of an NFL corner he has become. Johnson's at his best in zone coverage, which makes him a great fit for Chicago's defensive philosophy. Last season, Johnson ranked 6th in zone coverage rate among corners who were on the field for at least 500 snaps in coverage, and the frequency of those zone calls maximizes his skill set. When the defense calls a coverage that tells Johnson to bail into a deep third or deep quarter, he's great at jumping routes that break back to the ball. Here, for example, Chicago is in a quarter-half coverage, which calls for cover 2 to the weak side and cover 4 to the strong side, where Johnson is aligned in off coverage opposite the number 1 receiver. Patrick Mahomes sees that off coverage look pre-snap and wants to take what the defense gives him by targeting Justin Ross on a quick hitch route. This should be a routine completion that sets up 3rd and short. The ball is thrown accurately and on time, but Johnson's trigger on the route puts him in position to contest at the catch point, and he finds the football to force an incompletion. He isn't a special athlete by NFL standards, but this short area burst is not normal, and it allows Johnson to break up passes that should be easy completions. Cornerback is one of the hardest positions to play in football, because corners are often at a disadvantage before the quarterback even takes the snap. So one of the keys to playing corner at a high level is knowing when to live to fight another down and when to be aggressive. Johnson is an extraordinarily aggressive coverage defender, but his aggression is calculated. A couple weeks ago, Johnson was on Richard Sherman's podcast, which is a great listen that I'll link in the description. During that interview, Sherman referenced this interception from Johnson's Week 12 game against Minnesota as an example of how good he is at playing the curl to flat zone in a cover 2. That's what this looks like, because Johnson was so aggressive in covering this inbreaker from the number 1 receiver. But to Sherman's surprise, Johnson said that this wasn't a quarter-half coverage that assigned him to cover the flat. The call was actually cover 4 palms. Johnson played that inside breaking route so aggressively that he made the coverage look like quarter-half by abandoning his deep quarter assignment in favor of a quick hitter underneath. But he knew that there would be a corner route behind that inbreaker. So once he passed the number 1 off to the linebacker, he bailed to the corner and baited Josh Dobbs into throwing a pick. Usually, corners who are borderline reckless like this in zone coverage habitually give up big plays, but Johnson doesn't. Last season, he was one of only 4 qualifying corners who allowed a completion rate of 50% or less when they were targeted in coverage. But those other 3 guys also allowed big gains way too frequently, which was reflected in their average yards per reception allowed. Joey Porter, Martin Emerson, and Ahkello Witherspoon all allowed over 14 yards per reception, while Johnson allowed less than 8. So not only was he top 5 in completion rate allowed, but also 1st in yards per reception allowed. That is a rare combination that you only see in corners who consistently prevent both separation and yards after the catch. Whether he has to make a play before or after a completion, Johnson has a knack for finding the ball. Here, Tampa Bay called a bootleg, which tells the quarterback to fake a wide zone handoff and roll out against the flow of the offensive line. Jack Sanborn, the linebacker lined up on the bottom half of your screen, is rushing the passer on this 2-deep zone blitz call, which gets him in free, but also leaves the tight end wide open underneath. When Baker Mayfield completes this pass to his tight end, Johnson rallies to the ball from his curl to flat assignment. At this point, Tremaine Edmunds is there to make the tackle, but instead of relying on Edmunds to finish the play, Johnson finds the ball. So when the tight end breaks free, Johnson connects on a peanut punch to knock it loose. He's at his best when his eyes are on the quarterback. Assignments that put Johnson in bail technique, where he can jump routes and play the ball, are where most of his big plays come from. But when the matchup or situation favors man coverage, Johnson can more than hold his own. In Week 8, for example, Chicago played the Chargers, who have a quarterback who can rip zone coverages apart all day, but they don't have top-tier receivers who can separate against man coverage. So even though the Bears are a zone-heavy team, they left their comfort zone in this matchup by calling man on 40% of their coverage snaps. Here, at the end of the first half, LA is facing 2nd and short, which makes this a great time to take a shot. Chicago called man-free cover 1, which isolates Johnson on Chargers rookie receiver Quentin Johnston. Justin Herbert likes the matchup pre-snap, so he gives his guy a chance with the good ball, but Johnson wins the physical battle through the route and breaks it up at the catch point. Johnson is average in terms of size, but that doesn't stop him from imposing his will in man coverage. Here in Week 15 against Cleveland, Johnson is lined up in press man on Browns receiver Cedric Tillman. Tillman is 6'3", 215 to Johnson's 6 foot 190. So Tillman has a significant size advantage, but Johnson wins the physical battle at the line of scrimmage anyway. It's tough to tell what route Tillman was even running because Johnson had him out of bounds before the ball was thrown. Even though he isn't a perfect fit for a man-heavy role, Johnson was awesome in his limited man coverage reps last season. In 2023, he played man on 19% of his coverage snaps, which ranked 37th among qualifying corners. But in man coverage, he was only targeted 8 times and only allowed 3 catches. So he averaged 11.9 snaps per target and 31.7 snaps per reception in man coverage, both of which ranked first among qualifiers. The turnovers and pass breakups mostly come from battle technique and zone coverage, but Johnson doesn't shy away from physical battles at the line of scrimmage the way some zone corners would. He craves contact, so when he's given opportunities to set a physical tone, he doesn't let them go to waste. Johnson's desire for contact also makes it really tough to run screen passes to his side, because he loves taking on blocks and making tackles. Here, for example, back in Week 3 against Kansas City, the Chiefs called a split zone run with a wide receiver screen option built in. Patrick Mahomes is coached to hand the ball off unless there's a clear numbers advantage on the 2 receiver side, which here there is. Chicago has 2 defenders in the area, both in off coverage, which should create a one-on-one matchup for Kadarius Toney with a defensive back in the open field. The coverage never fully develops, so it's tough to tell what the exact call was, but the nickel, Greg Stroman, is rolling into a deep third or deep half post-snap, which creates tons of space between Jaylon Johnson and the nearest defender. This is the look that Andy Reid wanted when he called this play, but Johnson triggered on the ball, knocked the blocking receiver back, and made the tackle to hold the play to a loss of a yard. He isn't a physical freak like Pat Surtain or Sauce Gardner, but he does offer a combination of instincts in coverage and competitive toughness at the line of scrimmage that very few other guys with a similar athletic profile have. His reps in battle technique are teach tape quality, and he sets a physical tone that you just don't see very often from a guy his size. Caleb Williams and the talent around him are getting the bulk of the Bears' media attention this offseason, but Ryan Poles has quietly built a scary young defense, and Jaylon Johnson will continue to be their key playmaker in 2024. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I recently posted my entire fantasy football target list on my Patreon, so if you want to see who I'm drafting, hit the link at the top of the description. I don't spend a ton of time working on fantasy related stuff, and I definitely don't claim to be a genius when it comes to fantasy football, but I do watch an unhealthy amount of tape. So if you want to see the players who I think are undervalued in the fantasy landscape based on what I see on film, check it out. All it takes is $1 a month to become a member, and it's a great way to help me continue making these videos. But that's all I've got for now. I'll see you guys in the next one. So until then, peace.